This episode is brought to you by AudioQuest, makers of the mythical series Analog Interconnects. Click the link in the show notes for more information.
In today's video, we're going to talk about a streaming active stand mount two-way loudspeaker that I alluded to during our review of the Klipsch The Fives, also a streaming active two-way stand mount loudspeaker. And what we're going to talk about today is a new speaker from SVS. It's called the Prime Wireless Pro. It sells for $800 I believe, which is pretty much the same as the Klipsch loudspeakers. And this Prime Wireless Pro is actually an update of the Prime Wireless that I think came out in 2019. So I'm not going to talk a lot about music today. I am going to show a lot of music in this video, so keep a close eye on the B-roll for lots of different bits of music. At least I'm not planning to talk about a lot of music today. That's the plan. So yeah, we should make a start. Now, I'll say right out of the gate, I'm not a big fan of the way that the SVS Prime Wireless Pro look. I think the Klipsch The Fives, super awkward to say that. I think the Klipsch are a better looking loudspeaker. The SVS come in a high gloss piano black finish. You can also get them in a white finish. They feature a 5¼ inch mid-bass driver, which is a bit bigger than the 4.5 inch that was in the original Prime Wireless speaker. That's augmented by a rear firing port, and then also obviously on the front we get a 1-inch aluminium dome tweeter. The electronics inside the SVS sit in the right hand loudspeaker, and the left hand channel information is sent across to the left speaker using an umbilical cable. And much like the Klipsch, for me that umbilical cable is not quite long enough for me to have them on stands fully separated without a big sort of U-shaped cable link in between. So really, I think once again, perhaps SVS are intending people to put these loudspeakers on a low board, but I don't do that. And unfortunately, unlike the Klipsch, there's no switch on the back of the primary loudspeaker to change its role from left to right or back again. So that primary loudspeaker has to go on the right if you want to have left and right channels properly organized as per the artist intended, which is a bit of a faff, but I've managed to kind of cable mine in just, but I would much prefer it to be on the left. Of course, you might have a different take on that. And if you were here right now to walk back behind that right hand loudspeaker, you would see that the SVS also suffers from the same problem as the Fives did with the primary loudspeaker, in that you get a whole sort of slew of cables coming off the back. On that back panel, we've got two line-in inputs. One's 3.5mm, one's a pair of RCAs. We've got a Toslink input, we've got HDMI ARC. There's no phono here though on the SVS, and there is on the Klipsch. And I'd say that fully loaded, just like the Klipsch, the SVS really needs some very careful cable management to make them look a bit better than I have them here right now. Back inside the box, this is a digitally active loudspeaker, so the crossover is done in DSP. The crossover talks to a pair of 50 watt per channel amplifiers. So the tweeter gets 50 watts, class D, and the mid-bass driver gets 50 watts, class D. And then preceding the amps, but after the crossover, there are DACs. They are 24-bit 192 PCM capable. I've got no idea about DSD, sorry, I never use it. One major advantage that the Prime Wireless Pro holds over the Klipsch Fives is the presence of an internal streaming board. And that covers off the big three, and we can do that with a choice of Wi-Fi or Ethernet. Now, what do I mean by the big three? I mean Spotify Connect, which obviously just sends the stream off to the speaker, and then the speaker pulls the stream down from the cloud. We also get Google Chromecast built in, and that works in a similar way to Spotify Connect, although Chromecast isn't gapless, unless you use Roon to stream to it, but I'll come back to that in a bit. And then the third of the big three is Apple AirPlay 2. So we have to use an iOS device, and the stream travels through that device on its way to the loudspeaker. I will say something about Bluetooth actually, is that I'm quite fortunate to have a Bluetooth output on my TV. So instead of having the SVS Prime Wireless Pro's primary loudspeaker connected to my TV using HDMI ARC, I just use the Bluetooth connection because I don't really care too much about having the utmost sound quality when watching Netflix or Amazon Prime or YouTube. I do with music, but not with TV viewing, so the Bluetooth connection is perfect for that. And that means one less cable connected to the back of the primary loudspeaker. Now we get over-the-air software updates to the streaming board, and that is provided by the also included presence of DTS Play-Fi. Yes, this loudspeaker, it's got DTS Play-Fi on board. Now, many of you know how strongly I feel about Play-Fi, but I did. When I was speaking to SVS before accepting this review sample, I promised SVS that I would look with a fresh pair of eyes and ears at their Play-Fi implementation, because they told me that they were using, I think, a latest chip or a latest implementation of Play-Fi, so it might not be as bad as it was for me with the Audiolab 6000A Play streaming integrated amplifier. Alas, we still get multi-second gaps inserted by Play-Fi between the tracks in, I think, what you would call normal playback mode. If we instigate something called transfer mode, where the stream is transferred to the loudspeaker, those gaps are dialed down to 1 second. And that's not too dissimilar to Chromecast. And how you feel about gapped playback is a personal thing. I'm personally not a fan of it at all, as regular viewers will know. I can't stand it, and which is why I don't really use Chromecast all that much. However, Chromecast has one key advantage over Play-Fi in that it allows us to stay inside the native app. So I do a lot of streaming from SoundCloud, where gapless playback isn't an issue, because really what I'm playing are live sets and DJ mixes, and they're all one long, maybe 1 hour or 2 hour track. So that's perfect for me. And I like the SoundCloud app. I tell you one app I don't like the Play-Fi app. I don't like its interface. I think if you're going to force me into another app, you have to give me a user interface, user experience that is superior to, let's say, the Spotify app or the Qobuz app or the Tidal app or the SoundCloud app. And I'm sorry to say it, Play-Fi doesn't do that. If you think I'm being too harsh on DTS Play-Fi, have a listen to Dennis Berger and Brent Butterworth of the Soundstage Hi-Fi podcast talking about Play-Fi in the context of these Prime Wireless Pro loudspeakers. But they mistakenly believe that SVS have not put Play-Fi into this loudspeaker.
We haven't really ticked anybody off in a few episodes, so I'm going to say something that's going to make some people mad. It looks like they've ditched Play-Fi, which I'm very excited about because Play-Fi sucks.
That's a strong statement, Dennis.
I'm biting my tongue. It's not what I want to say. I want to say something much worse.
Surely every technology has its ups and downs.
The last time I gave it any serious attention which was a few months ago. It still didn't support gapless playback, which to me is just that's a deal breaker. I'm sorry, if you can't do gapless in 2022, get out of my way.
Anyway, moving on. So how did I test the Prime Wireless Pro for my listening experiences? Well, as mentioned before, I used Roon over Chromecast. I also connected my Samsung frame over HDMI ARC into the back of the primary loudspeaker before moving that connection to a wireless Bluetooth connection. And I also did a bit of Spotify Connect, which led me actually to do more Spotify Connect because on the front panel is this great feature. There are 6 preset buttons. And what those preset buttons allow you to do is basically bookmark, if you like, playlists on Spotify. They don't allow you to do anything with AirPlay, and I don't think they allow you to do anything with the Chromecast either. So what I did was in preset 1, I put my Spotify Discover Weekly, and in preset 2, I put my Spotify Release Radar. So all I need to do is push those buttons to activate those playlists, and they're dynamically updated by Spotify. And also really handy, where is it? Here's the remote control. Those preset buttons are also on the remote. So I just think that is a fantastic feature. Also, flanking those 6 preset buttons are 2 sort of rotaries that allow us to change the input. They allow us to dim the display. That does tell us the active input, but also gives us basic song information. So artist, I think also the album in some cases, and also like the logo of whatever service we're using, and then obviously volume control on the right. So having a very sort of hands-on, a bit like the Klipsch, hands-on interaction with the primary loudspeaker I thought was great. It makes them very family friendly, but more so because of those preset buttons. I know it sounds like super trite to say so, but I just think having something so convenient as that is just wonderful. Not just for audio nerds like me or possibly you, but also your family members, or if I have friends come over and want to play something and just tell them to push a certain button and music starts. Brilliant. So how do the SVS Prime Wireless Pro sound? In a word, balanced. We get just the right amount of everything. Nothing stands out, nothing sounds too dry, nothing sounds too top heavy. And what I mean by that is I was running the Sonus Faber Lumina II for a good few weeks before putting these in. I took them out, and obviously those Lumina II, or maybe not obviously to some viewers, is that they have a bit of a treble lift. There's no evidence of a treble lift in the Prime Wireless Pro. In fact, I suspect actually that maybe SVS have rolled off the treble here just a touch, which is a smart move if they are going to assume, probably correctly, that most customers, most people owning these loudspeakers are going to be streaming from lossy sources. Because lossy sources, especially with cymbals and hi-hats and with very high-pitched notes, synthesizer notes, they can sound a little bit ragged at times. I'm being super nitpicky, but I kind of appreciate that slightly. I mean, we're talking just a hint of a roll-off at the top. Maybe I'm overplaying it here. I'm sorry if I am. Crucially, the bass from the SVS doesn't mess up the mid-range. It doesn't muddy up the mid-range as it does with Klipsch's The Fives. And we don't need to sort of do a dance around inside an app, because there isn't one, not for these, to sort of sort that problem out as we had to with the Klipsch. And even then it wasn't completely sorted. Yeah, I think these Prime Wireless Pro sound significantly better than Klipsch's The Fives. I should add, actually, thinking about it, me talking about this sort of slightly rolled off treble, very slightly, is that doesn't make these speakers sound warm, not at all. And I love the sort of the fleshy, full, dynamic bottom end, which, just sounds perfectly proportioned and balanced and right. I think some people would listen to these loudspeakers and go, oh yeah, very neutral, right? Which is, how can you possibly know, because you weren't there at the recording, you got no idea. But I kind of know what those people are driving at, in that there isn't really any sort of obvious lift anywhere in any sort of frequency region. Maybe the measurements will give light to that. That's certainly nothing I can hear in my listening tests. But I would also say, and this is something that probably measurements can't tell us, is that, yeah, these speakers do sort of communicate the idea of neutrality, but they do it without any of that sort of squeegee clean, highly polished window effect that we get from, yeah, I guess quite a lot of other gear and possibly more expensive loudspeakers. I mean, if you put these next to a pair of Key 3, they're nowhere near as transparent or as impactful. But they're still, for the money, for $800, I just think they're wonderful. I think in the last 5 or 10 years, it's become a bit of a cliche to be surprised by how much bass comes out of such a small box. But what isn't a cliche is that it's becoming readily apparent that loudspeaker designers, when they're using digitally active designs, can extract more bass from a stand mount loudspeaker than they would otherwise manage if it were a passive loudspeaker. And the punchy low end that we get from the SVS that doesn't mess up the mid-range means that these speakers, the Prime Wireless Pro, are equally adept at music and movies. Now, right about now, some of you will be thinking, well, John, there's no way these loudspeakers can produce properly low bass. And you'd be right. Their -3 dB point is 42 Hertz. As far as I know, I think that's maybe 10 Hertz lower than the original Prime Wireless. So if we want proper low bass, below 40 Hertz, below 45 Hertz really, we do need to add a subwoofer. There is a subwoofer connection on the back of the primary loudspeaker. And when we connect, in my case, the 3000 micro, that I call the Micro 3000, when we connected that, it activates a high pass filter in the loudspeakers. So we get a high pass mains, low pass sub. Well, actually, it's not a low pass sub, because I think what it does is it hands off a full range signal to the subwoofer. So the subwoofer output, I think, is full range. And then in the sub, we have to apply the low pass filter. This is what SVS told me via email. And they said that even though the high pass that goes out to the sort of the mid bass driver and the tweeter, well, mainly the mid bass driver, is centered around 80 Hertz, in their listening test, they've had most success with setting the low pass on the sub. So using the app that I showed you in the 3000 micro video, send the low pass on the sub at 90 Hertz. Now for me, I got the best result at 85. For me, in this room, 6 meters by 5 meters. Yeah, I've said all this before. And adding the 3000 micro from SVS to their two-way stand mount absolutely enhances the sound of the complete system. It makes things better. Unlike with the Klipsch, where a subwoofer is, as I've subsequently learned, pretty much essential to make the Klipsch The Fives sound acceptable. Now, I find that a little bit offensive, that I need to add a subwoofer, so spend more money on an already kind of fairly costly loudspeaker, $800, to make them sound acceptable. You should never have to do that, never. What a subwoofer should do, as it does in the case of the Prime Wireless Pro, is take an already very good sound and make it great. So this all SVS subsat system, to me, sounds great. And I'll go further than that. I would say that I would much rather listen to this loudspeaker system with the sub, so the 2.1 system, than the same money spent on probably a slightly better active stand mount with no sub. The sub here, I think, really fleshes out the bottom. It adds the weight to the sound. It makes the imaging, the sort of the phantom center painted by the loudspeakers sound bigger, more visually impressive. Let's take the sub out of the picture again for a moment to ask ourselves, how do the Prime Wireless Pro compare to the €1,000 passive loudspeaker system that I introduced at the start of this year? So basically the DALI Spektor 2 loudspeakers, the Rotel A11 Tribute amplifier, and a $100-ish DAC. I can tell you that the Prime Wireless Pro, its player outlines, it sort of draws the sounds on the soundstage, are just more crisply defined. We get deeper, more impactful bass from the active stand mounts behind me. And we also get more evident, more abundant dynamic contrasts. Some of you will be thinking right now, what about the KEF LSX II? I don't know. I don't have a pair yet. Now, once this video is done and packed away and published, the Klipsch are going back in their box. And then that box is being shipped to one of my patrons that live in the EU. Because I gotta say, I can't wait to get rid of the Fives loudspeakers. And I absolutely do not feel that way about these SVS. I'm gonna put them in my bedroom. Now, I don't normally really like to have hi-fi in my bedroom because I've got hi-fi pretty much in every other room in my house. And one space needs to be generally hi-fi free. I'm making an exception here because the SVS is so easy to use. I love the presets. I love the fact that I don't have to sort of power them on and off. And they work with a whole range of apps, and basically both of my phones, my iPhone and my Google Pixel 6, so Chromecast and AirPlay, and yeah, mainly I use Roon over Chromecast. So they're a real find, these SVS loudspeakers, because I'd never really experienced the brand before until I did the 3000 micro subwoofer. And I only got that subwoofer because I knew that SVS wanted to send me these loudspeakers. So I'm thoroughly impressed by pretty much everything that SVS have done in both products, especially these speakers. And if I had to explain these speakers to some of my non-audiophile mates who were like, what should I get, John? What should I get? I would say these are what you buy when you're kind of getting tired of Sonos, or that the stereo width on a pair of speakers like this is much wider than a soundbar. So really you buy the Prime Wireless Pro because you want something that kind of works like Sonos, has an HDMI input so you can hook in your TV. But what I'm really trying to say, what I'm trying to get to here, is that I would say that the Prime Wireless Pro from SVS are kind of like Super Sonos. So, if you like the idea of Super Sonos in a package that isn't quite as stylish as the Sonos, but we'll forgive SVS for that. If you dig that and you dig the price point of these loudspeakers and the performance for that price point, which I very, very much do, then please give this video a like. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio, in that, I'll say it again, it's not just the expensive stuff that I cover. I do more affordable stuff, like these Prime Wireless Pro streaming actives. I think I would say that I wouldn't say that the subwoofer is essential, because the speakers go pretty low and they're pretty satisfactory in most situations. I think in a smaller room, that's probably all you'll need. But I gotta say, when I add the 3000 micro, I'm just like, wow, this is the most amazing sounding 2.1 system for not very much money. So if you dig that, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. A couple of addendums there. Olaf just asked, do those presets only relate to Spotify? No, they don't. They also relate to streaming done through DTS Play-Fi, but me, I'm not going to use that. One major advantage that the SVS holds over the Klipsch is that bollocks. Also on the sides of that screen. Oh. So how do the SVS Prime Wireless Pro sound? In a world, so this 2.1 system, all SVS louds. So this 2.1, all SVS speaker sub. Now, once this review video is done, the Klipsch are going back in the box and they're being given away to one of my European patrons. has an HDMI input so you can hook in your TV. To me, makes it sound, the whole soundstage sound more, sound, I'm saying sound a lot, honey.